Over 2,000 American servicemen were killed, and more than 8 decades later, the government is still trying to identify those we lost in the catastrophic blitz on Pearl Harbor.
The attack on Pearl Harbor claimed the lives of 2,403 U.S. personnel. While half of these casualties occurred on a single ship, the USS Arizona, where more than 1,100 men perished after an 1,800-pound bomb ignited its ammunition, hundreds of others remained unidentified for decades. Perhaps most shocking about these Pearl Harbor casualties is how they were handled after death. In this video, we'll unravel what it means to honor the dead and reveal all the things that the world didn't know about the bodies at Pearl Harbor. Kindly keep watching till the end. Number 10. USS Utah. When people think of Pearl Harbor, they often picture the USS Arizona, the most iconic ship lost in the attack. But resting quietly nearby is the USS Utah, a lesser-known battleship with a heartbreaking legacy of its own. Originally commissioned in 1911, the USS Utah had been converted into a target and training ship by the time World War II began. On the morning of December 7, 1941, the Utah was moored on the western side of Ford Island when Japanese torpedo bombers struck. Though it was no longer a frontline battleship, it was still a U.S. Navy vessel, and it went down fast. Within minutes, the Utah rolled over and sank, trapping dozens of men inside. Here's where it gets especially haunting. The bodies of 58 men are still entombed within the USS Utah, including that of Chief Water Tender Peter Tomich, who heroically stayed at his post to help others escape, earning him the Medal of Honor. But the most mind-blowing fact, the Navy never recovered the ship. It remains where it fell, partially visible above the water, a solemn tomb for the sailors who never made it out. And here's something even more emotional. Unlike the USS Arizona, which has a dedicated memorial and allows for interment of surviving crew members, the USS Utah's story remains largely in the shadows. Yet family members of those lost still visit the site, some even tossing flowers onto the water where their loved ones are entombed. This sunken vessel isn't just a ship. It's a war grave, a piece of living history, and a silent witness to unimaginable courage. So, if you thought you knew everything about Pearl Harbor, hold that thought, because up next, we're revealing more things you didn't know about the bodies at Pearl Harbor. You won't believe number 1. Keep watching till the end, because some stories deserve to be remembered in full. Number 9. The USS Arizona Band that died together. In May 1941, a group of young Navy musicians, most still in their teens, came together to form Navy Band Unit 22 under the leadership of Bandmaster Frederick W. Kinney. After finishing their training at the Navy School of Music, they were assigned to the USS Arizona just weeks later. What made this band unique? They weren't just musicians playing tunes for ceremonies and meals. These sailors carried the dual responsibility of lifting spirits with music and defending their ship in times of danger. Morning after morning, they played the national anthem during flag raising, offered jazz and marches to entertain the crew, and brought a comforting sense of normalcy to life aboard a warship. But underneath that harmony, they were trained for chaos. Each had a battle station, and in wartime, their instruments were traded for dangerous roles below deck, helping load ammunition for the massive guns. Then came December 7th, 1941. That morning, as the band prepared to perform for the colors ceremony, the sky filled with the roar of Japanese planes. Without hesitation, the musicians dropped their instruments and rushed to their battle positions. Just minutes later, at 8:06 a.m., a bomb pierced the ship's hull and exploded in the forward magazine. right where the band was stationed. In one instant, all 21 members of Navy Band Unit 22 were gone. Isn't it haunting to think that the very same day they prepared to play music, they instead became part of one of the most tragic moments in U.S. history? Even more heartbreaking is what came just before that fateful day. The band had recently been named finalists in the Battle of Music, a spirited competition among Navy bands. The final performance was scheduled for later that month, but it never happened. After the attack, fellow Navy musicians chose to honor them in the most touching way. They awarded the USS Arizona Band first place posthumously. The trophy was renamed and engraved with all 21 names, and today it rests at the Arizona Memorial Museum. Isn't it powerful how a simple trophy became a lasting tribute to courage, talent, and unity? Through it, we're reminded that those lost weren't just sailors. They were artists, friends, and young men who brought joy even in times of war. Number 8. The Mystery of the Unknown Graves. For decades following the attack on Pearl Harbor, hundreds of American families lived with a deep and painful question. Where exactly were their loved ones laid to rest? After the devastating 1941 attack, remains recovered from ships like the USS Oklahoma were buried in 46 communal graves at the Honolulu Cemetery. The markers? Simple granite headstones engraved with one heartbreaking word: unknown. It wasn't just a matter of lost bodies, it was the beginning of one of America's most emotional military mysteries. At the time, science was limited. In the 1940s, forensic technology couldn't do much to sort out the fragmented remains, and out of the nearly 430 sailors and Marines who died aboard the Oklahoma, only 35 could be identified. The rest were buried in 1949 at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, also known as the Punch Bowl, without names, without closure. Can you imagine not knowing for decades what happened to your brother, your son, or your husband? One man couldn't live with that silence. Pearl Harbor survivor Ray Emory, disturbed by the anonymity of his fallen comrades' graves, began a tireless personal mission. He dove deep into records, tirelessly comparing burial documents and casualty lists. Could it be possible, he wondered, that the unknowns weren't so unknowable after all? Turns out, he was right. His work led to a major discovery in 2003 when the military opened one casket and found remains from over 100 different individuals. A staggering find, but also a turning point. In 2015, the Department of Defense greenlit the exhumation of all Oklahoma unknowns. Thanks to advancements in DNA analysis, dental records, and anthropological methods, 361 of the 394 unidentified crew members were finally named. That's a 92% identification rate, unheard of for cases this old. For families like that of Carol Sowar, who lost 2 uncles on the Oklahoma, the moment of notification was emotional. She described it as a bittersweet relief. It took 80 years, but they're home. Beyond the personal stories, this effort sparked something bigger. The success of the Oklahoma project showed that even the longest military mysteries might still be solved. Through a mix of human dedication and modern science, hundreds of brave individuals have finally reclaimed their names and their place in history. Isn't that the least they deserve? Number 7. The Trapp Brothers' Long Journey Home. Among the many personal tragedies woven into the history of Pearl Harbor, few are as touching as the story of Harold and William Trapp, 2 brothers from La Porte, Indiana, who lived together, served together, and ultimately died together during one of the darkest days in American history. Raised in a family of 8 siblings, Harold and William shared a special bond. Born just 18 months apart, and close in heart as much as in age. In 1939, the brothers decided to enlist in the Navy together. Was it a sense of duty? Brotherhood? Likely both. They were assigned to the USS Oklahoma, where Harold served as a fireman first class and William as a machinist's mate, first class. For the Trapp family, having two sons stationed at Pearl Harbor was a source of pride, but also worry as the storm of war grew closer. Then came December 7, 1941, the day that would change everything. When Japanese torpedoes struck the USS Oklahoma, the ship capsized in less than 15 minutes. Trapped below deck, Harold and William were among the 429 sailors who never made it out alive. Just like that, two young lives, full of promise and brotherhood, were lost to the chaos of war. Their remains, like those of so many others, went unidentified for nearly 80 years. How could a family ever find peace with such uncertainty? In 2015, hope reappeared in the form of science. The Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency launched the USS Oklahoma Identification Project, using DNA technology and dental records to give names back to the nameless. Miraculously, in November 2020, the Trapp family got the call. Both Harold and William had finally been identified within days of each other. Their niece, Carol Sowar, who had only known them through stories, described the news as deeply emotional. "This is where they belong," she said at their burial. And so, on June 15, 2021, the Trapp brothers came home. With full military honors, folded flags, and a rifle salute, they were laid to rest side by side in Greenwood Cemetery, in the same hometown where they once played as boys. Isn't it incredible what time, love, and a little science can bring back? Their journey home is not just a family's closure. It's a nation remembering and finally honoring them properly. Number 6. The role of DNA in identifying the fallen. Modern science is doing something pretty extraordinary. It's helping bring closure to families who've spent decades not knowing what happened to their loved ones lost at Pearl Harbor. Thanks to the work of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, cutting-edge DNA technology is giving names to remains once marked as unknown. Isn't it amazing to think that with today's tools, we can solve mysteries left unsolved for over 80 years? The process is both meticulous and deeply meaningful. Scientists started out using mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mothers and sticks around longer in old remains. But here's the catch. Many of the service members came from similar maternal backgrounds, making it tricky to tell them apart. So, what did the researchers do next? They widened their approach. They brought in Y chromosome testing to trace paternal lines and also turned to nuclear DNA for more detailed analysis. The real game changer, though, was something called SNP capture technology. This method zeroes in on around 95,000 markers in a sample. Yes, 95,000, and can work even with remains that are old, degraded, or chemically treated. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. And the results? They speak for themselves. In the case of the USS Oklahoma, over 5,000 DNA samples were collected, and out of 394 unknowns, 361 were identified. That's a 92% success rate, much better than the 80% the DPAA originally hoped for. But not every case was straightforward. What happens when the remains belong to twins? In situations like that, scientists had to turn to dental records and physical traits. Take Harold and William Trapp, for instance. They were finally told apart because Harold was a few inches taller. Interestingly, one unexpected helper in the identification process was the oil that coated many of the remains. Who would have guessed that the oil from the attack might have actually helped preserve the bodies? But as DNA testing advances, it also raises new questions. Should unidentified DNA be uploaded to public databases to search for matches? And how do we protect the privacy of families? Despite the challenges, the DPAA's mission hasn't wavered. They're committed to giving every fallen service member a name and a story. Because after all this time, don't they deserve to come home? Think you know everything about Pearl Harbor? Think again. Some of the most mind-blowing facts are about the bodies left behind and what was done with them. There's honor, there's tragedy, and there's one shocking detail that was kept hidden for decades. Stick around till the end. It's worth it. Number 5. The Memorial Traditions of the Arizona. The USS Arizona Memorial is often described as one of the most important and powerful tributes to those who lost their lives during the attack on Pearl Harbor. But what makes it so much more than just a memorial? Right after World War II, there wasn't an immediate plan to build a lasting memorial, but one man, Robert Ripley, yes, the same Ripley behind Ripley's Believe It or Not, was moved enough to reach out to the Navy with an idea to honor the Arizona permanently. Imagine that, a man best known for weird facts and oddities stepping forward with a vision to create a sacred site. Yet, the Navy initially declined the proposal because they were worried about the costs involved. But the story didn't end there, did it? No, it was the start of a movement. By 1949, the Pacific War Memorial Commission was formed, showing just how many people wanted to see this idea come to life. Before the memorial itself was even built, there was already a tradition in place to honor the Arizona. In 1950, Admiral Arthur Radford started raising a flag from the sunken ship's main mast every day, symbolizing that the memory of those lost was still alive and respected. Isn't it remarkable how this simple act began a practice that continues to this day? A few years later, in 1955, a basalt stone and plaque were placed on the ship, marking its location and significance. But when did the memorial as we know it actually come into being? It wasn't until 1958 that President Eisenhower officially approved a national memorial, allowing the project to move forward. What's really impressive, by 1962, the memorial was completed and dedicated, and the design itself carries so much symbolism. It was created by Alfred Price, an Austrian-born architect who had endured internment during the war, which adds a whole other layer of meaning. One of the most touching traditions started in 1982 when survivors of the Arizona's sinking were given the choice to have their ashes placed within the ship's hull after they passed away. This practice creates a profoundly intimate connection between the survivors and the ship. What kind of feeling must it be to know that you can rest eternally alongside your fallen friends? It's hard to imagine, but it speaks to the enduring bond forged in those tragic moments of history. Every year, nearly 1.8 million visitors come to see the memorial, drawn by its historical importance and emotional impact. The memorial is divided into 3 main sections: the entry, where visitors arrive and begin their journey; the assembly room, which features 7 windows on each side to commemorate the date of the attack, December 7th, 1941, and the shrine, which bears the names of the 1,077 crewmen who lost their lives on the Arizona. Can you picture standing there, surrounded by the names of so many who never returned, feeling the weight of that sacrifice? Perhaps the most haunting and unforgettable part is the large opening in the floor of the memorial, where visitors can look down and see the actual sunken decks of the ship beneath the water's surface. Even now, decades later, Oil still leaks from the wreckage, sometimes called the ship's black tears. Isn't it almost like the ship itself is crying out, a silent but constant reminder of the lives lost and the price of war? How many other memorials carry that kind of personal connection, where the living and the dead are united? The memorial invites each visitor to reflect not just on history, but on the human stories behind it. The bravery, the loss, the resilience, and the enduring spirit of those who served. And so, the USS Arizona Memorial stands not just as stone and concrete, but as a living reminder of sacrifice, a place where history is kept alive in the hearts of all who come to honor it. Number 4. The forgotten civilian casualties. When people think about the attack on Pearl Harbor, the first images that come to mind are usually of burning battleships, heroic sailors, and the sudden devastation that shook the U.S. military. But what about the people who weren't in uniform? The ones who weren't on the battlefield but still found themselves in harm's way. During the December 7, 1941 attack, 49 civilians were killed and 35 more were injured on the island of Oahu, ordinary people who are too often left out of the history books. Among them was a 3-month-old baby, Janet Yumiko Ota, who tragically died with her mother and aunt when their home was hit. Can you imagine the heartbreak of an entire family wiped out in seconds? Not because they were fighting in a war, but simply because they were home? The tragedy didn't stop there. Many civilians worked near or within military areas, including shipyards and airfields. One shipyard worker ended up in the hospital alongside sailors and Marines after being hurt on the floating dry dock YFD-2. At Honolulu's John Rogers Field, Japanese aircraft targeted the airport, and a civilian was killed right there during a strafing run. But here's the twist. Some civilians didn't die at the hands of Japanese bombs at all. Shocking as it may seem, many perished because of America's own defense fire. Anti-aircraft shells that were meant to stop the attackers didn't always explode mid-air. Instead, they fell back to the ground, exploding in neighborhoods. One particularly heartbreaking story involves Jitsuo Hirasaki, a 48-year-old restaurant owner who was killed along with his 3 children, a teenage relative, and 7 others who were simply eating breakfast when a shell hit the building. Even beyond Honolulu, places like Waipahu and Iwa weren't spared. Sugar mills, completely civilian in nature, were mistaken as targets, leading to more deaths and injuries. It raises the question, how many stories like these have we never heard? Today, some of these civilians are remembered at the World War II Valor in the Pacific National Monument. Exhibits and mini-documentaries at the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center have started telling their stories, helping to shine a light on this forgotten part of history. And really, isn't it about time their voices were heard too? We all know Pearl Harbor was tragic, but the truth about the bodies left behind is way more disturbing than your history books ever let on. And that strange little side story, the Nihao Incident, turns out it changed everything. Ready to learn what they never taught in school? Watch till the end. Number 3. The Nihao Incident's hidden consequences. While the bombing of Pearl Harbor is often the center of attention when people talk about December 7, 1941, there's another story from that same day that many haven't heard, one that quietly shaped America's controversial decisions in the months that followed. It all started when a Japanese pilot named Shigenori Nishikaichi crash-landed his damaged plane on Nihao, a small and isolated Hawaiian island. At first, the locals had no idea what had happened in Pearl Harbor earlier that morning. So, in keeping with Hawaiian custom, they welcomed the injured pilot and even treated him with kindness. But that hospitality wouldn't last for long. Once news of the attack reached the island, the situation quickly changed. A local man of Japanese descent, Yoshio Harada, was asked to keep an eye on the pilot and translate. But before long, something unexpected happened. Harada switched sides. Can you imagine the shock? Together, he and Nishikaichi retrieved weapons from the downed plane, took hostages, and even tried to gain control of the island. But their plot unraveled when Ben Kanahale and his wife Ella, both island residents, bravely fought back. Though Ben was shot several times, he managed to overpower and kill Nishikaichi. Harada, realizing the damage he had done, took his own life. In the days that followed, the incident became more than just an isolated island drama. Military officials used it as evidence. But of what, exactly? They argued that it proved Japanese Americans could not be trusted. It's unsettling, isn't it? One incident, involving just 3 people, became part of the rationale for Executive Order 9066, which led to the internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans. The Navy's own report pointed directly to Nihao, suggesting that even those thought to be loyal might turn against the U.S. in a time of war. Looking back, many historians now see the Nihao incident as an example of how fear and isolated events has led to sweeping and harmful decisions. Was it fair to judge an entire group of people based on what happened on one remote island? That question still lingers today, and it reminds us how even small, forgotten corners of history can carry massive weight. Number 2. The story of Ray Emory's advocacy. Ray Emory never imagined that surviving the attack on Pearl Harbor would one day lead him to a mission that would change how the U.S. military identifies its fallen. Born in 1921, Emory served as a seaman first class aboard the USS Honolulu on that fateful December 7th morning. While bombs rained down and chaos engulfed the harbor, his ship narrowly missed being hit by torpedoes. He survived, but the memory of what he witnessed and those who didn't make it stayed with him for the rest of his life. After completing a 20-year Navy career and working as a structural engineer, he eventually retired in Hawaii, where an unexpected calling awaited him. In the early 1990s, Emory paid a visit to the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. What he saw there deeply unsettled him. Rows of graves labeled only as unknown, many of them belonging to sailors lost at Pearl Harbor. Why were so many still nameless after all these years? That question sparked something in him. He decided he wouldn't let their identities remain forgotten. Turning his home into a sort of personal war records lab, he dug through countless files, ship logs, and dental records, often working alone. Through painstaking research, he began to match names with graves, believing he could help give these servicemen back their identities. His breakthrough came in 2003 when the military agreed to open a casket Emory had identified as likely containing remains from the USS Oklahoma. And just as he suspected, the remains were successfully identified. That moment didn't just validate his work, it changed the game. In 2015, thanks to his tireless push, the Pentagon launched a project to exhume and identify all the unknowns from the USS Oklahoma. As a result, 361 sailors were finally named and honored properly. Emory's efforts earned him the Navy's highest civilian award, and in a touching moment in 2012, Pacific Fleet sailors surprised him with a formal salute at Pearl Harbor. He had spent years fighting for the names of others to be remembered, and now he too was being honored. Before passing away in 2018 at age 97, Ray Emory made one last visit to Pearl Harbor. As sailors lined the decks in his honor, it was clear his mission had made sure that no one would be forgotten. Isn't that what every hero truly wants? Number 1. The USS Oklahoma's salvage and recovery. The story of the USS Oklahoma is one of tragedy, resilience, and remarkable human determination that has echoed through the decades. On the morning of December 7, 1941, as Japanese planes roared through the skies over Pearl Harbor, the USS Oklahoma quickly became one of their first and deadliest targets. At around 7:56 a.m., torpedoes slammed into the ship's port side with brutal force. 8 in total struck the massive battleship, causing catastrophic flooding. What could anyone have done in such a short time? Just 12 minutes after the first hit, the entire ship had rolled upside down, trapping hundreds of sailors below deck. In the end, 429 lives were lost, a devastating toll that made the Oklahoma's sinking one of the deadliest naval losses during the attack on Pearl Harbor. But what happened next might surprise many. While the grief was enormous, efforts to salvage the wreck didn't stall. By 1942, teams began the painstaking process of cutting into the exposed hull, eventually rescuing 32 trapped sailors. Then came the monumental task of righting the ship. Starting in March 1943, engineers used 21 thick steel cables anchored to the harbor floor, altogether stretching 25,000 feet, to gradually roll the 35,000-ton vessel upright. Just imagine the coordination and patience that took. After 3 long months, the ship finally stood upright by June 1943. But the damage was done. Officials decided that the Oklahoma was far beyond repair and decommissioned her in September 1944. Later, she was sold for scrap, her battered hull no longer fit for sea. Still, one chapter remained painfully open: the fate of the men who had perished. At the time, only 35 of the 429 fallen sailors were identified, leaving hundreds buried as unknowns. Families waited and waited. Then, in 2015, something extraordinary began. Scientists with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency launched the largest forensic identification project in U.S. military history. They used modern techniques like mitochondrial DNA analysis, along with dental and bone records, to do what once seemed impossible. And they succeeded. By 2021, they had identified 361 of the previously unknown sailors, a stunning 92% success rate. It was a breakthrough that brought long-awaited answers to families who had waited nearly a lifetime. Isn't it remarkable how science and persistence can rewrite even the darkest chapters of history? With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.